Microelectronics. Well, this is dumping huge amounts of electromagnetic energy in the air. And yeah, we'd be able to wirelessly turn on our lights, but there'd be no radio communication. The interference would be something would be overwhelming. It would induce electric currents in anything with a small wire on it. So integrated circuits, transistors would be disintegrated before they were even, tested for operation. So it would
Maybe
destroy.
It would have fucked us up.
Yeah, it would have stopped us dead. It'd be great. You can turn lighters on and heaters from all over the place with no wires, but it would stop modern electronics.
And if we became dependent on it, it would almost be like our dependence on fossil fuels. Although it's destructive, it's very difficult for us to get off the nipple.
It would have changed the course of how we developed, which is so interesting when you talk about if a civilization, another star system, didn't even start with fossil fuels. They had 115 naturally on their planet, and they're like, cool, anti-gravity is pretty awesome.
Well, the fact that they didn't
I think
have
it's important that actually happened.
Yeah.
It might have been stopped in its tracks for a reason.
Whoa. And I think it's incredibly difficult for us to imagine technological progression under another timeline other than the one that we've experienced.
Yeah, that's difficult.
If we imagine what this alien race must have been like, and God, just to be able to see something, obviously we've seen it in different life forms, right? Like we see the life of certain beetles in comparison to the life of certain fish. Very, very different existence, very different life cycles.
Octopus.
Yeah, octopus. Yeah, we see all these different variables in terms of biological entities on Earth, but we don't see it in terms of technological innovation, as we're the only one that's intelligent that can innovate. We have intelligent creatures, but they're in the ocean. The only other thing that are like us are dolphins and orcas and whales, and they don't have the ability to manipulate their environment. And subsequently, because they don't have the ability to manipulate their environment, we put them in fish tanks. And we're like, get in the tank, do some tricks.
Right.
The only thing he saw in the craft, if we were considering Bob's story, the only thing that he saw in the craft that he related to that looked like a human could make was this honeycomb hatch. And I always love that because you're like obsessed with this thing that you could recognize.
I only focus on that because it was the one thing that I understood how it worked.
What was it?
And it was the access to the level below, and it was if you take you have a 6-pack of beer and you take out the cardboard dividers, set it on the table, you can put a lot of pressure on the top. But if you push it from the sides, it collapses flat. So it was something like that in a honeycomb shape that was essentially some sort of sheet metal, and you could walk on that in the upper layer, but if you took the corner, stuck your finger in, and pushed, it collapsed and made an entryway. So I thought that was a really unique, I'd never seen that before, and it was the only thing in the craft that made absolute sense to me. I said, we can make that, and all that is a hatchway.
Was there any discussion about the materials that were used to make the craft?
I'm sure there was, but that was the metallurgy division. It had nothing to do with us.
So you never got
not even the slightest briefing. I don't even know if it was metal or it was ceramic. I think there's a fine line between the two.
Now, one of the things that's happened to you that has allowed people to discredit you was there's obviously been some sort of an effort to erase your past.
Yeah.
Some sort of an effort to erase your education history, your employment history at Los Alamos. In fact, The only way your employment history was proven at Los Alamos is someone got a directory of the employees from the past and read into it, and you were on that list. So it proved that you worked there even though people were trying to deny it, and they were trying to use that as a way to discredit you, that you never did work at Los Alamos. You weren't really a scientist. What was that like to experience? Of course, we're talking about the 1980s, the 1990s, when you could get away with something like that.
Yeah, obviously there were a lot less records on computers at that time. It was still file cabinets and folders. But that was frightening. That was one of the first things
What happened?
I think George Knapp was the first one that uncovered that. He saw my birth certificate disappear.
It disappeared.
Yeah,
there was no record of you being.
Yeah, there was no record of that. There was
his mom
no
tells
record.
His mom tells me about that. Like it was frightening for her. He's got a real family. He's a real person. It was frightening for her.
But the Los Alamos thing really surprised me. and that they were so adamant that, no, this guy never worked here. Don't be ridiculous. And George went back and forth, for
I got the letters on the wall, yeah.
months. I mean, it was ridiculous. But fortunately, somebody came up with a 1982 phone book directory. I mean, and also, originally I told you, when I worked there, I was on the front page of the paper. So they
Yes.
were still able to archive, bring that back from the archives. And, Bob Lazar, a physicist working here at Los Alamos. So there was at least something there. But somehow George came up with the phone directory.
And then Bob took George with cameras into Los Alamos.
Oh, yeah. So we flew out there, and I said, look, come on in. I'll show you where I worked. We'll go in. We'll meet people. And George went with me and,
And
filmed
you knew
inside
how to
there.
navigate the place, so you'd
Oh,
obviously
yeah,
been
and,
there before.
met people, and, and
Los
so there
Alamos
no
was
problem.
also the place where they had the machine that was able to read the size of your digits.
No, that was
That
at Los
wasn't?
Alamos. That was S4.
That was S4. And explain that.
So now this was back in the 80s.
And this is back in the 80s where when you discuss this, people are like, this doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
Okay. What was it?
It was a way, this is before fingerprint scanners and, and any high resolution scanner at that time. So what it was a device that had a little picture of a hand on a glass plate with pins in it, so you could jam your hand in there. And there was a bright light above it and a sensor underneath. And when you put your hand in there, the light would turn on, and it would measure the bones in your finger because the light shone through your bones. And apparently, the length of the bones in your fingers are extremely unique and easy to measure. And they used that. When you put your hands on there, the light would turn on and your badge would pop out.
There's it right there.
Oh, there it is. That's it. And I tried to describe this to people, and they said, that is the most ridiculous thing we've ever heard. And I said, hey, my badge came out of that thing. I put my hand on it, badge popped out, and that's how I could open the doors and get into S4. And,
and everybody discredited that. They said it was bullshit. It was science fiction. And Jeremy, you found this.
I found it through a good friend of mine named Tyler Rogaway, and he had some good sources inside of Area 52 where they also used these for the stealth program right around that time. So now I've got all these people that worked within who, said only if you're in certain programs would we use this technology. It was kind of shit, actually. They didn't keep it for very long, beginning of biometrics. So I was able to reveal it in my film. I kept my mouth shut until I showed it to Bob. In the movie, his first time he saw it was how you see it in the documentary. That's his genuine reaction. I'm getting goosebumps.
That was a great idea, the way you did it.
Thank you, man, because you know what? Guess what? I'm actually trying to see if he's telling the truth. That's how I started. That's how I started. So it was really cool to see that, and that you get to see it, his actual reaction.
Has that been verified by other people?
Yeah, so to me it has. Personally, I get emails every day, and people are telling me where these are used and how they're used, and to send me photos. I got a lot of photos of Identimats now.
Well, how they were used, right? They're not
how they were used, but
but
I don't. The most recent one was way more recent than I thought in another country. But yeah, that technology was used. So what's so funny is that this technology, even in the Area 52 where they'd use them for Tonopah, one of the guys who will go on camera with me, he will do an interview with me. He was a technician for one of these, and he hated them because they were really bad. They always broke down and he was a technician for him. Now, he won't tell me where. If he worked at Area 52, so it's probably Tonopah. It's very separated, even on base, but yeah.
So there was that.
Yeah.
There is your education record. That was also, what happened with that?
That disappeared also. That I've never gone anywhere for education. I never attended any classes at Caltech. I never attended anything at MIT.
You did attend classes in those places?
I did attend classes in those places.
Do you know anybody that you went to school with?
Yes, I do.
And have they verified that they went to school with you?
Well, I gave Jeremy some names, but the reason I don't say these names publicly is because every single time I mention a name, somebody gets in trouble.
They don't want to be.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But what is that experience like, seeing your birth certificate erased, seeing your employment
Well, it's
history?
frightening. It's absolutely frightening.
But it's also the fuel that the debunkers use, the so-called air quote skeptics. I don't like the term skeptics. I'm going to say this publicly because I really want to say this privately. I think it's a sloppy, lazy way to look at things, to just be a skeptic.
Look,
I want people to be objective. And I think there's a lot of things you should be skeptical of. I think you should look at things and look at things from a hardline science perspective. You should
Absolutely.
be objective. But the idea of skeptics, the problem with that is you're always looking for things to be bullshit.
Yeah.
And I think that's dangerous because I think some things aren't bullshit.
It's confirmation bias on the other end. You're just deciding to take a square thing and put it in a round hole no matter what.
And I find a lot of them to be lazy.
Yeah.
A lot of them to be lazy thinkers.
Sure.
Because they're always putting it into that box instead of going, Instead of just separating their ego, they're playing a game. And the game is calling bullshit. I want to call bullshit, and I'm going to line up all these reasons why it's bullshit, and I'm going to ignore anything that might be contrary to that definition.
Yeah, that does.
Every time I'm thinking I'm going to catch him in something, all along this process, I found Dr. Krangle. He came forward and said, I was in security briefings with Bob Lazar, the physicist at Los Alamos. He went on the record with me. Now, the other people I talked with, why won't they go on the record with me? Because they're still working there. So that's the difference, right? What can the public have, right?
Or even if they're not working there, they want to live their lives. Why? I mean, obviously, people have seen what's happened to you.
Mike Thigpen, after 30 years.
Yeah, really,
I found him.
if you look at all the information on, concerning my accounts, that's verifiable. It can't possibly be a bullshit story anymore. It's really way past that point.
Yeah.
I mean,
That was
Mike Thigpen is, how could I
who is this
possibly know?
So Mike Thigpen was the guy that did the security clearances to go to the base. One of the guys that was
And this
used.
is the guy that you worked with.
He said he did.
Right.
And George Knapp, George didn't believe him. George put him through 4 polygraph tests, right? He tried to see, man, this is a big risk. It sounds interesting, but let's see if he's telling the truth. One of the things was, Bob said there's a guy named Mike Thigpen. He did security clearances for the base, and that's a weird name. It's a very specific. For 30 years, George found this guy in this weird department that he didn't even know it was Mike Thigpen. The guy wouldn't talk to me, ghosted him, totally ghosted him for 30 years. Used Facebook and Google Image Match through his children. I was able to find him after 30 years, and I talked to him 3 times on the phone. He lives on the East Coast. He almost went on camera with me. Confirmed that he did security clearances for the base in 1989, confirmed he remembers Bob Lazar, and what you don't know is there's a handwritten note that a friend of yours has from Mike.
What?
I know, I'm going to give it to you later. But that is real, that is actual. So
A handwritten note that says what?
This is new to me.
So when you're
When they do security clearances, they go through all your friends and family.
And they go to your friends' family, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is to Bob,
wow.
and I had people come to me for a friend of mine that's serving, and they're doing a security clearance for him, and even though I'm like...
Go through all your...
This says what?
What?
I know, I'm going to give it to you later. But that is real, that is actual. So
A handwritten note that says what?
This is new to me.
So when you're...
When they do security clearances, they go through all your friends and family.
And they go to your friends' family, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is to Bob,
wow.
and I had people come to me for a friend of mine that's serving, and they're doing a security clearance for him, and even though I'm like the UFO guy, they did, the FBI will come and visit my house and make sure that they talk about my friend, and they lift a little card. And when my wife told them to get away, because she didn't know who they were, they left a little card. It's super cute now. Back then it was a handwritten note, and his friend has it for him that you haven't seen in
Oh my God.
2 decades. So if you're listening,
How
friend,
come you're telling me this now?
I don't know why I'm telling
What
you
is this
that.
card?
It's just a little handwritten note with Mike Thigpen's signature.
Oh, I mean a card, like a postcard.
Like a piece of paper that he
Okay.
left on the door saying when Bob gets back or whatever it says on it. So it's just another little funny thing. I found the guy, he does the security clearances. He admitted to me he did it, and he admitted to me he was dodging George Knapp because when George said his name on the news, he dropped his fork into his steak or into his potatoes or whatever, and he's looking at his wife. He was in trouble. His name's never supposed to be out there like this. Just a security clearance guy. But you don't want national attention associated with anything Bob has to say. But anyway, this unique name Bob said for 30 years, and the guy ghosted George Knapp. George could prove he existed. He actually talked to me, man. He talked to me 3 times. He almost went on camera with me. It's just crazy. What happens after 30 years? You just get more info.
Well, that's one of the reasons why when you and me and Jeremy and George Knapp had that conversation on the phone, I said, I think what we can do with this podcast is important. I really do. I think it's important for people to hear this from you in a very clear, just very concise way. And if you examine all the information that you've said today, if you look at all the things that the detractors have said, if you look at all of the new recent evidence that's coming out and all these really high-level people in the military and the government that are discussing this, it gives you far more credibility than you would have had in the 1980s when this came out.
Fuck yes, you can't ignore his story just because you don't like it anymore.
That's why I thought it was important that you come out and refresh the world's memory and let people know. And like I said, I don't want to say I'm a fan of yours, but I guess I'm a fan of yours. As a human being, I'm a fan of yours. But I've been following you for decades. I've been following the story for decades. I mean,
no kidding.
I have VHS tapes
Bob,
at
like
home.
a lot of the world has.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, anybody that has any sort of a vested interest or just a fascination with UFOs has followed your story because there's no one else. There's no one else that comes forward. There's some guy who said, I worked underground with the aliens. They shot my hand off. Like, there's a bunch of like wacky dudes. They're underground. There's bases. They're shooting lasers through the Earth's crust and they move them at light speed. There's a lot of those guys. They seem schizophrenic. They seem crazy. They might even be disinformation agents. They might be people that are designed to muddy the waters, which for sure has happened.
People are coming forward, though, now. It's amazing. And by doing this, what you're doing, you're providing an opportunity just for Bob to tell his story. You know, believe it or not, he can tell his story. It's amazing because more people will come forward now that are involved with these projects. They'll come forward to you, to me. They're coming forward. And so what you've done here is provide that opportunity if they need it. And it's amazing. I just want to say, Bob,
just don't come forward to me.
No, don't come forward to Bob. Why were you freaking nauseous at the beginning of this, like so upset? Why'd you have a migraine? Because that started off so hard. My God, I was sitting here like, did this?
Well, why are you asking him why? It's
because
obvious. Anxiety. The guy's gone through 30 fucking years of being persecuted. They've erased his birth certificate.
I just want to hear him.
What do you want to hear from him?
I want to hear him say. I want them to
Why
hear
do
him.
I have to say that?
You don't.
Joe just said
we
it.
get it.
I step out.
Okay.
Settle down. Yeah, I get it. It was hard for you to get him here, you know, and I appreciate
it. Was hard for us. You
did a lot more than me.
What really annoys me are the people that think, you know, you guys just came up with the story to make a bunch of money or get a bunch of, you know, attention. And
that's a good point. So please explain that.
First of all, I don't get any money out of this at all, and I didn't even let you guys buy plane tickets for me to come out here or anything. I mean, anytime, like when Jeremy previewed, I guess, the movie up in Michigan. I mean, it brought in like a couple $1,000s. I made sure that $2,000 went to science programs at the local high schools there.
It's like dirty money. He doesn't want to touch it.
I don't take any money from this stuff. And as far as attention, I hate fucking attention. I don't like being on shows. I just want to kind of hide in the corner and do my own thing. So I got enough hugs when I was a kid. Okay, I don't need any attention. So, no, if you think somehow we came up with this thing, then you got to tell me why we did it.
Well, you've done a great job of making sure you have your bases covered in that regard. That you haven't profited off of this, and like you said, that you have donated whatever money that came your way to science programs. It doesn't make any sense any other way. I mean, what I've gotten out of here is what I thought I was going to get out of here when I watched the documentary. That what you're saying makes sense. It doesn't make sense that it's bullshit.
It happened exactly like I said it did, Joe.
I believe you. In closing, is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I can't think of anything other than really don't come and try to visit me.
Well, I know that you have paid a huge personal cost to get this information out, and I mean, maybe you didn't understand what that cost would have been when you first initially came forward with the story, but over the past 30 years, it's been immense. It's been great, and I just want to thank you for that. And thank you for all these people that would not have gotten this information and would not have really had this story any other way.
Oh, thanks, Joe.
Thank you. And thank you, Jeremy. And one more time, the documentary is available on Netflix right now.
Yeah, it's called Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers.
All right. That's it, folks. Good night.
Yeah, you did it, dude.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Kyle Kalinske sent me something today. I wanted you to see, Jamie. It's there's some shit going down with UFO sightings.
Oh yeah,
Those
yeah.
videos
I've been
we've played before.
Well, yeah,
I
but
don't know that they were new.
here,
but
I'll send it to you.
I've been following this stuff.
Yeah, it's all right, I just texted it to you. Pentagon officially releases UFO. This is the tweet. It says, new Pentagon formally released 3 mysterious UFO videos captured by Navy pilots. The already leaked videos showed what DoD insists on calling unidentified aerial phenomena, moving at incredible speeds and performing near impossible maneuvers. This is a weird subject because it's one of those subjects where people automatically dismiss it because it's been so touted by kooks. There's so many wacky fucks that have talked about UFOs that anybody talking about UFOs has to be out of their fucking mind. But then when you see these videos and you see them performing these impossible tasks, like these things are moving in a way that we've never seen anything move before. Flipping upside down and sideways, moving at insane rates of speed. Like, they don't know what these are.
Yeah.
Aerial phenomena.
What's interesting, though, is I was reading one of these stories, and they passively mentioned that the sighting was near a U.S. naval technology station of some sort, like a top secret development. And I'm like,
that could be one of two things: either it's developed by the people that are at that base, or they're monitoring the people that are at that base. These aircraft, we call them aircraft, are displaying characteristics that are not currently within the U.S. inventory nor any foreign inventory that we are aware of. Maybe they see this shit that's going down with China and all the ships being moved and like, listen, you fuckheads.
the aliens?
Yeah, maybe they're like, listen, you fucking morons, you territorial apes.
I'd like to think that, but
You don't think so?
Manhattan Project, man. I mean, the U.S. has probably got some crazy motherfucking weapons. You know?
Could be, but the Manhattan Project was also coincidentally right after they started detonating bombs when the aliens started showing up.
That's what they think, right?
Yeah, well, that was when the bulk of U.S. sightings started jumping, and worldwide, I believe, too.
You know, maybe we've slowly been getting more and more information about this. I've been actually reading a lot of these stories over the past several months. More admissions from government, more release of documents, and more sightings. So there's been a big, I don't want to call it, well, a lot of people murmuring that April was going to be the month when we finally learned the truth. April's almost up.
It's almost up.
It's almost up.
We got like a few days.
Nah, man.
The 27th.
You know what I used?
More days.
Do you know?
30.
Do you know about what happened? Do you know about the O'Hare Airport sighting?
Which one's that?
So this was, I think, in like 06 at Chicago's International O'Hare. A UFO came down and hovered above. I can't remember which terminal it was. It hovered for a few minutes, I think, and then shot straight, punched a hole in the clouds. Everybody saw it happen. Now, I had just quit working at O'Hare around this time when the sighting happened, so I had friends who were still there. I had a friend tell me that when this UFO came down, people on Mannheim Road, which is the road on the side of O'Hare, got out of their cars, like just stopped at the light, got up, and were looking and staring at it. And that the people who were working, where we worked for American Eagle Airlines, walked out of the rooms and were just staring at it float and then shoot up and punch a hole in the clouds. And you know what they said? Weather phenomenon. So there's a photo of it. A pilot took a photo of it. This is back when like very early phone cameras, so it's a very grainy, awful picture.
There it is right there.
That's not it. No, that's super fake. I think, no, these are all people trying to fake it. It's really hard to find. That one is not, that one might be it, but I don't think so. It barely looks like
Chicago
anything.
O'Hare.
That one, no, these are all people trying to fake it. It's really hard to find. That one is not, that one might be it, but I don't think so. It barely looks like anything.
Chicago O'Hare UFO sighting 2006. Is that it right there?
I do not believe those are it, no. So
click on that article. See what it says, Jamie.
That's just some blog.
That one might be on the left, but so many people try exploiting this stuff for clicks and for views, and they make these fake photos. And
that
it was
link's not working?
I've clicked on it a few times.
It was a very, very faint photo from the cockpit. It might be that one right there in the middle. On the on the left side.
Far left.
It might be that one. No, that's not it. That's not it. Well, there was a really crappy photo of it, and
that might be it.
That might be. It was out of the cockpit of a window. A pilot took a photo, and I wonder where have all the sightings gone since phones became ubiquitous. I mean, there's a simple, I guess excuse. The aliens, they're sentient. They know we have phones. They're like, okay, stop, decloaking or whatever. But I wonder if, why is it there were so many UFOs and then around the time cell phone cameras come out, they're gone?
Well, I think most people are full of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people like to pretend they see things that don't really see things. But I don't think that excludes the possibility. It's not like it's not like these things are mutually exclusive. Like people are full of shit, therefore aliens don't exist. I think aliens could be real and people are full of shit. And I think that it's very rare that they visit us. But if they do, how often do scientists go to the Congo to study chimps? I mean, how many people do they send to the bottom of the ocean to look for new life forms? How rare is it?
Let me trip you out on that idea. We put decoys up for animals. Animals can't tell the difference. What if you've actually met a decoy person? You couldn't tell the difference.
Maybe it's you, bro.
Maybe it's me. That's right.
And that's why you're able to work so much.
Oh, yeah. Robot.
You don't get tired.
No.
So you're interested in news and disseminating factual evidence.
Because what I'm actually doing is collecting a database for the aliens. No, but I thought about this because I saw a photo on Reddit of puffin, I think it's called, the bird, and they put up a fake puffin, and it's because I think they're called puffins. It's because the birds don't like nesting in places where they're alone, and so by putting the decoy there, the other birds would start coming, and one bird showed up and was hanging out with the decoy, and I'm like, could you imagine you see, we put duck decoys in the water. We do duck calls. And the duck's like, ooh, hey, fly honey, I'm going to come over and check this out. It's like a wood block. Could you imagine, seeing, a beautiful woman or someone you're attracted to and being like, ooh, look at that. And it's really, an alien decoy just to, probe you and, better understand you or something?
Well, the decoy, just the term decoy is weird because decoys are used for hunting. Turkey. It's turkey season right now.
Yeah.
And the way most guys hunt for turkeys, they take a rubber turkey. You put that fucker out in the middle of the field, and then you hide behind a bush with a shotgun. You go, and then the turkeys hear it, and they come over and they try to get some pussy, and then they get shot.
So what if you see some dude or it's like you see it for you, it'd probably be a beautiful woman. You want to get that pussy, and you know, and then she's going like, hey, come over here. And you're like, oh, hey, me. And
And
then,
then I get eaten.
no, they just, you know, take you up in the ship, probe you, and
I
learn
don't
about
think
your
they
butt.
need to. This is the thing about putting things up your butt.
I'm
Most
just kidding,
doctors
man.
don't even do that. Like, they have MRIs now. Don't aliens need to probe you in your ass? I think it's just what everyone's afraid of. They're afraid of things going in their ass, so that's what they think is going to happen if the aliens get them. They're going to freeze me and touch my ass.
Somebody told a dumb story back in the day, and it was the most sensational version. Everybody had to have it, so they were like, that's what they went with, you know?
Maybe, or maybe they do that to keep your mouth shut. They fuck you in the ass just so you keep your mouth shut.
Or some dude actually got abducted, right?
Yeah.
And he comes back, and he's like, they think they won against me. They think they beat me. They put stuff up my butt. They're weirdos.
Do you ever hear
They're
the story of Betty and Barney Hill?
No.
It's the very first UFO abduction story. It's an ancient story. And what's crazy is Angela Hill, who's a UFC fighter, I had her on the podcast. And after the show, she told me her grandpa was Barney Hill.
Whoa.
And I was like, holy fuck. Like, we didn't talk about it during the show, but she wanted to bring it up because she knows I'm kind of obsessed with UFOs. But the account that they have, like, they get hypnotized and he's recalling the abduction, and they have like the same story. It's very terrifying. You hear him crying and screaming, and you know that he was taken aboard this craft and examined and brought back, and they have missing time. But here's the thing: if they only did that occasionally, if they only came down once every few years and just scooped some person up in the middle of some rural place, like if you're flying over, you know, I think their instance was I believe it was in Maine. If you're flying over somewhere like Maine, which is a very low population state, and you see a lone car, and it's just traveling along the highway, and there's places in Maine where you go from like Portland to Bangor. When you're traveling on that road, it's like 60 miles with nothing, not a gas station, nothing. If you were an alien and you saw a car by itself, you're like, no other cars, move in, we got one.
Isn't it just easier to think it's the U.S. government?
No.
Why not?
Because we don't have the capability of doing something like that. I don't think the capability of the scientists working for the government is any different than the capability of the scientists that are working for, you know, Project X, or, you know, fill in the blanks in terms of like what Raytheon, publicly traded companies.
How long? Look, quadcopters don't seem all that complicated to me. Right?
Quadcopters.
Yeah, like
helicopters,
like drones. You know, we've seen the little drone toys you buy. They got 4 propellers. Take that concept, use thinner, you know, jets, and surround it in a disc so that it's, you know, universally, like, it can move in any direction because it's got, you know, because it's
what power
omnidirectional.
source? Where's the gas tank?
Well, lithium-ion battery, or
You're talking space shit. Like, this hasn't even been invented yet. Think about how little mileage you can get out of a Tesla.
You know, they had
as
no.
advanced as Tesla is.
You know,
it's still, when it's going full out, it can only go for, I mean, you get 307 miles if you drive like a grandma, but if you drive like a maniac, you don't even get half that.
You know that they, I could be wrong with this, but I'm pretty sure that they had this flying platform in the 70s that uses gas power, and they've also had jetpacks for a long time.
No, they've had, sort of. They've had jetpacks that are capable of going for like 30 seconds. They don't, I've experienced
No,
these.
I'm pretty sure the jetpacks back in the day went for a long time.
No, they definitely didn't.
We can look it up.
Yeah, let's look it up, because they
'Cause
definitely didn't. The whole thing was the fact they were burning gas, and to propel you in the air, they only had a certain amount.
I thought it was like 30 minutes.
Maybe now.
My understanding of why we abandoned jetpack technology was that it was inefficient and heavy, and you couldn't carry it without it being turned on. So they opted for larger, like, you know, like, what are they called? Chinooks, helicopters that can carry multiple people at once. When you're wearing a jetpack, it has to be on idle, negating its own weight, which means it's burning as you're walking around, which means you get a good 20-minute jump, and you got to abandon the tech. And then you don't want your enemies to get it.
Have you ever seen a guy fly a jetpack?
Yeah, there's a video on YouTube from a
No,
long
I mean
time
in
ago.
real life.
Oh, I've seen that one guy, the Iron Man dude.
Well,
Not in real life.
I've been there in real
Yeah.
life. My friend Willie B from in Denver on the radio.
Yeah.
He had a radio show in the morning. I used to do his radio show. I think he still has a radio show. Shout out to Willie. And he had this guy who was a jetpack pilot who came in the parking lot of the radio studio, and, you know, fans of the radio show came and did it too, and watched it rather. And this guy flew in the air for about 15, 20 seconds and then landed. This guy was so banged up, both of his legs were blown apart. He had big braces on both of his knees. I'm like, what happened to your knees? He's like, just crash landing. Both of my knees are blown to shit. He had no ACLs in either one of his
Right.
knees. But
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's good
Jetpacks.
this is back then. It was
Right.
good for about 30 seconds. 30 seconds of flying.
Well, so the point I was trying to get to is if you take something like a quadcopter, you could absolutely fuel it with gas or
It'd be
whatever.
loud as fuck.
But it would depending on how you mitigate
It'd be
the
an
noise.
engine. It'd be an engine.
Yeah.
It'd be loud as fuck.
And you'd hear from the quad rotors.
Yeah, but what these people are describing is nothing like that. These people are describing things that are silent, that go from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour in a split second. The things that defy physics
Right.
as we understand them.
Yeah.
This is not something that I think that the U.S. government has. If you look at like Elon Musk company, Project X or SpaceX. SpaceX is right now one of the premier civilian companies, private companies that's making rocket ships. They fuck up all the time.
Totally.
They're in the middle of innovating all the time. He's one of the smartest people on earth. He's one of the, in terms of technology, he knows as much about propulsion as anyone, and they still can't get it right. They're still trying to figure it out. They're trying to come up with something that could be viable in terms of commercial space flight, and they're working on it daily. And these people are the brightest minds we know of right now that are in this jet propulsion space travel business. There's Virgin's working on something. There's a couple other companies that are working on things as well, and then you have NASA, which worked. The best they could come up with was the space shuttle.
Right.
Do you think that there was something way better than space shuttle that they just never used, that they had, and they kept it on the back burner, didn't want to let anybody know? But the way they would use it is they would pick people up and erase their memory and toy with
Experiment
their
on them?
asshole. That's crazy.
Well,
That's less likely than the hundreds of billions of galaxies just in our own known universe, right? Each one with hundreds of billions of stars, each star with who knows how many fucking planets. That's somewhere out there that's something more advanced than us, maybe 1,000 years, maybe 1,000,000 years,
But
that's figured out how to come here.
I got the same question then. Why hasn't anyone discovered them? Why has SETI failed? Search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Why
Well,
haven't the
nothing.
chimps invented guns?
They've started using more tools, but
Right, why haven't they invented guns though?
I don't know.
So why hasn't SETI found UFOs? It's the same fucking answer. They're not advanced enough yet. It's a real simple answer. The industrial age is pretty fucking recent.
Right.
I mean, you think about when people invented cars. You're talking about 1800. That's really recent.
And we've
Plane
only used
flights,
radio-
1800s.
High power radio transmission is only in the past 100 years or so.
Right. Well, you ever seen the movie Contact?
Maybe. It's an old one, right?
It's Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. It's based on Carl Sagan's book about contact with space and with aliens, how it's going to go down.
I think I did see it recently. I can't
Interesting take on it. But
Oh, yeah,
the idea is that they've received the signal that we sent out way back, in the day, actually, when the text of this. And
Well, so I got a few. There's a few issues I see in terms of aliens and Earth contact. Right, we are substantially more connected, via, in an evolutionary chain to ants than we are to any alien. So we can't communicate with them for the most part. We kind of can. We understand how they communicate. But when an ant sees a superhighway, this is someone else's quote. They don't think twice. So it's possible there are aliens that have superhighways right above us. We can't tell what it is. Same as a dog doesn't understand other than stay away
Sure.
from it. But one of the issues I think is often neglected in the conversation about aliens is we assume aliens would be on a very similar planet to us. We assume that they would have some kind of gaseous atmosphere, perhaps it's a liquid atmosphere. And one of the things that I would ask of a researcher, because I'm not the expert, is the fact that we have the proper balance of oxygen in the atmosphere to manipulate fire, which allows us to separate elements and then create computers and components and fuels, wouldn't exist on a planet without the same atmosphere we existed
okay,
in.
stop. I can answer that really easily.
Yeah.
There's no known propulsion system for any of these crafts. These things are not using fire. They don't have a heat signal. They don't know what they are. They don't know how they work.
I don't mean propulsion. I mean the separation of elements, the manipulation of elements, right? So we melt things and separate them and break them down.
They don't believe that that's how it works.
No, but I mean, like, how do you even start from? I'm sure there's an answer. Let's say you have a species that lives on a planet with no oxygen, has no access to fire. What energy, what dense energy source do they have that will allow them to manipulate matter?
Do you know the Bob Lazar story?
I do.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that he talked about when he first stopped working for Area S4, and the government was tapping his phones, and there's a lot that can be documented about him. There's a lot that can't be. But one of the things that he talked about was a thing called element 115.
Right.
That element 115 is this insanely dense element that they use to bend gravity. And that the way he described the way the propulsion system works, it's like putting a bowling ball in the center of a very soft mattress, and that all of the other mattress, all the rest of the mass of the mattress bends around the intense mass of the bowling ball, and that this is how these incredibly advanced aliens from this other planet use. This is their propulsion system.
That was
they
from
use this.
It's from Star Trek, though. The concept of warp was around for a really long time.
I think the concept is based on Einstein's theory of gravity. I mean, this is the whole idea. If you could find something that could do that. But here's the thing. When Bob Lazar talked about this in the late 80s, early 90s, this element didn't exist.
Right, now it does.
It wasn't proven until they did it in a particle collider. I believe it was 2013. So he was talking about this element far before it was, and he's apparently, this is the big rumor, he apparently had taken some of that from a lab, and through George Norrie, and was it George Norrie? Yes. They did some experiments on on television and showed that this stuff had made light and fog bend in a way that they couldn't describe.
He also didn't he also claim to see a small alien creature on his way out?
He said he saw something that was sitting down, but he doesn't know if it was a model that they were using, like if they had created something that was supposed to be the size of a thing that could fit in these crafts, because these crafts, he said, were designed for things that were far smaller than human beings.
I'm pretty sure in the initial interview he gave when he went public was that he saw an alien, and then later on changed it, saying, I don't know if it was maybe a model or a puppet.
Yeah, he said he thought he saw something sitting down and two people were standing over it looking at it. He said he thought he saw an alien. But he's probably, I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, he said it was literally for like a half a second. Like he's walking by a window and he sees something inside of it. Imagine being a guy who's in your 20s and you're a propulsions expert, and it's been proven that he worked at Los Alamos Labs, and it's been proven that he did put a fucking jet engine. Yeah, it's been proven that he did put a jet engine on a Honda. I mean, he's a genius. And you talk to him, he's an incredibly smart guy. Now imagine you get sent off to Area S4, and they show you this thing that you know doesn't even exist, and they tell you about this propulsion method that they don't understand, and they say that they found this a long time ago in an archaeological dig, and they want you to back engineer it because you're a propulsions expert, and they're running out of options. They've been studying this for decades. No one knows what the fuck it is or how you can make it work. And then they do test flights with this thing, and then he tells his friends about these test flights. After he gets fired, you know how he got fired? Do you know a story about him getting fired?
He leaked it or something.
No, his wife was fucking her flight instructor.
Oh.
And so when his wife was fucking her flight instructor, they told him he couldn't work anymore. And he's like, why not? Well, they were tapping his phone, because when you have top secret clearance to work on UFOs, I guess they don't want your wife fucking her flight instructor, because then you're going to go crazy, and you have a lot of imbalance at home, right? So he doesn't know why. They don't tell him why. So he takes his friends and he tells them, listen, this is real. They're running these experiments. I know you're thinking I'm crazy. This is what I've been working on. So he takes them to this area where you used to be able to have access to, but once he did this, they closed off access and pushed it far back to where the public has access to. And he showed them these things doing these impossible maneuvers in the desert, in the night sky.
This I remember.
And so then he gets arrested. And so when he gets arrested, he was in fear of his own life. He goes public and tells this whole story, and then they erase his past, they erase his social security number, they erase his education background. Even though people that knew him and knew he worked at Los Alamos Labs, he takes George Norrie of a tour of Los Alamos Labs, knows the people that work there. They all say hi to him. He takes them on a tour around the laboratory. Shows them around, shows them the devices they use for biometric security. And
I think the one thing you can't ignore is that there was documentation that he did work at one of these places.
Yes.
And they later claimed he didn't.
Yes.
And like I think I was watching the thing on, maybe it was Netflix. I think like he promoted that, right? It was on Netflix. They showed the paper, like, we found it.
Yes.
Like he clearly was there.
He was in the employee registry.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No.
But you know, for me, man, I'd love to believe it all.
He's been insanely consistent about that story.
Yeah.
For 40 years.
I want to believe. You know what I mean?
Or 30 years, whatever. Yeah, I want to believe too. That's the
But,
problem.
man,
The
Pixar
problem
didn't
is
happen.
I want to believe, but
Yeah.
that's nonsense. Pixar it didn't happen is nonsense.
Well, I'm
how do you
just-
what about Neanderthals?
No, that's
what about dinosaurs? There's no pics.
I'm more so joking, right? What I
Yes,
mean
I
is,
understand.
show me the evidence, right?
I get it.
Let's, the challenge with any theory, I don't like saying conspiracy theory because they're not always conspiracies, is that people want something to be true, and so they end up looking for things to justify what they think it already is.
Of course.
Instead of starting with what you've got and trying to figure out where it goes from there.
But when you start with what you've got a guy who was living in Vegas, was taking these flights out to Area S4, knows the place, knows it inside out, can describe it very accurately. Also worked at Los Alamos
this proves
Labs,
he was there.
describes that very accurately.
Right.
Yeah,
It proves he worked there.
yeah. It
But
also
I-
proves he's also a legitimate scientist.
But what
I
if?
mean, when you talk to the guy, he's a brilliant guy. He's not a nut.
Right.
But what?
Are you saying aliens?
That doesn't mean aliens.
No, I'm just asking. Like, so
It doesn't mean aliens, but that's what he was told.
Right.
What he was told is this is something that has come from somewhere else, and they're trying to figure out how to work it, how to use it.
what if we're in a simulation, and this was something that was leftover code, or it wasn't supposed to be placed in this certain iteration?
Or what if there's multiple dimensions that we don't
Yeah.
have access to, and that these things do?
The Joe Rogan Experience.
You should tell Joe about how the government program OSAP was created directly because George wrote this book about a little place called Skinwalker Ranch where the government was studying this property. That happened because of his book. Some DIA guys. Well, you should tell the story of
I
the
visited
link.
that place.
Yeah, but right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you got a little misled on it.
Tell him how the government study started. From your work. It's fascinating.
So some of it stems back to Lazar. So we did that story in the series in '89. One of the first people to call me after that was a guy I'd never heard of before named Robert Bigelow, a billionaire. He calls me up and says, I was really interested in that. I've been interested in UFO questions. Is there life elsewhere in the universe? Is it here? And do humans survive after death? And he assembled this board, former CIA guys, 2 former astronauts, men who had walked on the moon, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Dr. Hal Puthoff, physicists, psychologists, a brilliant little think tank to take on these 2 topics. I was allowed to be a fly on the wall for some of it, not all of it, but some. And I told Harry Reid about it in 1996, and he said, can I go? And so he showed up and sat in on the meetings, and he was kind of hooked. Harry Reid was the first person I told about Bob Lazar outside of our newsroom. Before we aired the stories, I'd known him since he first ran for Congress in 1982. Then he becomes Senate Majority Leader. So he had always had an interest in it, but he didn't want it to be known publicly. That does not help your reelection chances. So in 2005, we write the book about Skinwalker Ranch. NIDS, that team, bought the ranch. They were on the property for 7 or 8 years at that point and had hundreds of different incidents that they investigated. They approached it like scientists would. They looked for prosaic explanations. They looked for gravity anomalies. They looked for psychoactive plants. Could there be hallucinations caused by magic mushrooms or something? Are the witnesses lying? They investigated the background of the family that had lived there. And they found out that it could not be explained, all the range of activity there. So it was not only
What
UFOs.
kind of activity are we talking
Well,
about?
it starts with UFOs because that's what got their attention. The Uinta Basin in northeastern Utah has always been a UFO hotspot. Everybody who lives there basically has seen them. Balls of light, orbs, structured craft, daylight, nighttime. In 1976, a guy named Dr. Frank Salisbury wrote a book about it, The Utah UFO Display, and he took hundreds of these cases that have been collected by the locals. There was a local science teacher named Junior Hicks who, because he had taught generations of kids science in that area, when people would see UFOs, they'd call up Junior Hicks. And he went and go and investigate them. And he had hundreds and hundreds of files. He gave them over to this guy Salisbury, who wrote a book about it. And he said, these are real, they're going on. But Junior Hicks would disregard any high strangeness cases that came along with the UFOs. Anything weird, Bigfoot, ghosts, anything like that, he thought it was too incredible, and he discarded that. Bigelow buys the ranch. He hears about these stories going on this one property, flies in, meets with the rancher, and by this time that rancher and his family had lived on the ranch for 20 months. And they were so scared that he, his wife, and his 2 kids were all sleeping at night on the floor in the same room because it had messed with them so badly. Their property had ghost type activity, poltergeist kind of things, trickster activity. For example, the wife goes shopping to the grocery store. She buys all this food, comes back, puts it on the table, takes it out, puts it in the shelves, leaves the room, comes back in, all the food's back in the bag. She would take a shower in the morning, locks the door, puts a towel and a hairbrush on the cabinet, gets out of the shower, door's still locked, hairbrush and towel are gone. Dad's out in the field. He is digging a post hole, using a post hole digger, heavy piece of equipment. He stops for a second, wipes his brow, looks back, and it's gone. And they find it 2 weeks later up in a tree. They start hearing voices at night in the air, speaking a strange language. They start seeing shapes outside the window at night, big, lurking humanoid shapes, hearing heavy footsteps outside, then hearing heavy footsteps inside. Then their animals started being mutilated. Cows, the tracks would lead out into the snow and then just be gone. Calves, mutilated, cut up with surgical precision. Cats, wiped out, cut up, carved up. Dogs that were vaporized. Hundreds of these incidents. They would see holes in the sky, like a great big hole in the sky, and things flying in and out of it. Now this rancher, college-educated guy, grounded, strictly religious guy, thinks the government is trying to run him off his property. So he's out there at night lurking with a gun trying to catch whatever government agents are doing this stuff. And it's not government agents, it was something else. They start seeing UFOs of all shapes and sizes. The first one they saw was they thought it was a Winnebago. This ranch is a beautiful place, and it only has one way in and one way out. They see these 2 lights that look like headlights down in the 3rd homestead. How did this guy get past the house here and get down there? He must be stuck. Let's go down and help him out. The lights start coming toward he and his son. Then they go up into the sky, up over the trees, and then poof, gone. These different kinds of orbs, the white ones that were intelligently controlled, not fireflies, not bugs, blue ones that would go, they seem to touch the fear center in your brain. They'd get near them. They look like a little bigger than a softball, made out of glass with a swirling blue liquid. Scared the hell out of the animals, and then it scared the hell out of the people too. This literally drove them to their knees with fear. These red orbs that would stampede the cattle. They lost so many cattle that they began to think that they were going to go under. They had these 4 prized bulls. I know I'm jumping around, but there's a lot of stories. They had these 4 prized bulls, 2,000 pounds each, behemoths, very expensive animals because they were raising Simmental cattle. Had them in the corral, and the husband and wife, they always felt like they're being watched. He says to the wife as they're driving to town, man, if something happens to one of those bulls, we'll go under, we'll be done. They come back a half an hour later, all 4 of the bulls are gone. They jump out, they're freaking out. Where did they go? Did somebody steal them? Are they rustlers? Looking around all over the place. In this corral is a metal trailer where they used to store tools. And there's only one door into it, and it's locked with this heavy piece of wire. The door is still locked, the wire is still on there. The guy, just as a last resort, he looks into the grating on top of this trailer, and there's the 4 bulls inside. Door's still locked. They're all crammed in there. Now you could take a forklift. You could have a team of 50 people and they couldn't get those bulls in that trailer, but there they were. He yells to his wife, hey honey, they're in here. And when he says that, the bulls wake up as if out of a trance, kick the door down and all got out. The NIDS team, which had been on the property for a couple of years at that point, fly in. They'd been in Las Vegas. They fly back in. They look around. They check out the animals. The whole corral, which is made out of metal, had been magnetized. So whatever technology was used to get those bulls from the corral into that trailer left a magnetic signature. They were there on the property, the NIDS guys, for several years. Bigelow owned it for 20 years. but eventually they gave up. Whatever this thing was, this intelligence, it did not like being stalked, and it played tricks on it. And they never made the stuff public because what are you going to do? Write a paper about this? Who's going to print it? You can't make a documentary about it because they weren't there with cameras.
Is there any evidence? So, well, all this we're saying, those cattle mutilations, I guess that's some evidence, but that's the only evidence of cows, and we can mutilate cows. What about all this other stuff?
Like for the first 20 months when the rancher is there, they don't have any evidence because he's not a paranormal investigator. They're not taking photos or something. They want it to go away. So they don't have any evidence of that except for what the rancher told them. But then they talk to the larger community, and the same thing has been happening to all the neighbors. The guy who lives next door had lost all these cattle as well, sees the craft. Sometimes these craft would float around. They looked like stealth fighters with Christmas lights around them, floating around silently.
Again, is there any evidence?
No, not really. I mean, So Bigelow puts up cameras all over the property, and you have them focused here where some activity had happened before. The thing moves over here. You move the cameras and focus there, it goes away. Toward the end of the study, whatever it was that was there, one of these cameras would rip to shreds. They're up on top of a telephone pole, 30, 40 feet in the air. And there's wires that are secured all the way down the telephone pole. And they noticed that one of their cameras goes out. They figure, well, there's another camera on another pole that should have a view of whatever it was that tore this up, some kind of animal or whatever. Well, whatever it was invisible. And I know it's very frustrating. It certainly was for them and for me to try to write about it, in that this thing didn't want to be caught. It wanted to demonstrate that it was there, but it didn't want to have evidence. The calf that was mutilated was in, I know it's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
The calf that was mutilated, it was a Sunday morning. It's 10 o'clock on a quiet morning. It's daylight. The rancher and his wife are there by themselves. They're tagging newborn calves, tag their ears. And they tag this one right by the ranch house, 50 yards from their home, and they go off across the property. It's a clear day. It's unobstructed. Their dog is with them and makes a noise that points them back toward that first calf that they had tagged. And the dog indicates that something's wrong. And they see the mom cow is dragging its leg and going around in a semicircle. It's in distress. They go running back over there, and this calf had been completely stripped of flesh. Nothing left but a hide and bone, and one of the femur bones had been ripped out and thrown on the side. Well, they call in the NIDS guys. They bring in trackers. There are no tracks. There's no human tracks, no vehicle tracks, no animal tracks. The thing had been completely stripped of blood. There's not a drop of blood on the ground. It's gone. 75 pounds of meat gone. Again.
Over a time period of
30 minutes. Is there a team of commandos that comes in and does that?
Where's the blood go?
Yeah.
And there's evidence of this?
Yeah.
Photographs?
Yeah, video. Yeah.
Can we see that?
Yeah.
Where is it?
I made a movie called Hunt for the Skinwalker. It's in there, right? Is that the only place?
Yeah, it's probably some other places. There's photos and video.
I mean, so I'm with you, man.
What's the speculation about, like, why would they do this, and why would they do the cattle mutilations? Like, what is?
Yeah.
Is there any speculation?
Some. So some of it is a demonstration. I mean, it seemed to be a demonstration to get their attention. This trickster element has been reported in other places around the world. There's no hot spot quite like Skinwalker, and I know how weird it sounds. There's no spot like that because there's no spot that's been studied to that extent. The NIDS guys were there Bigelow owned the property for 20 years. NIDS was active for 7 or 8. Then another secret study funded by the government came in under an organization called BASS. That was the money that Reed got. He got $22 million. It went to Bigelow as a contract, and they hired all these people and fanned out all over the world to try to find UFO information, but other related phenomena, things that wouldn't seem normally to be connected to UFOs, but which are. A guy from the DIA had read the book and became interested, and he asked for permission to go to the property. This guy's a double PhD, a brilliant rocket scientist who had seen it and thought there were national security implications, the hole in the sky in particular, with things coming in and out. He wondered if someone was using technology to make these things happen.
Did they film that hole in the sky?
No. Again, that's when the rancher is there by himself. So he's not a UFO guy. He's not trying to...
I understand. But is there any evidence of anything weird? anything other than mutilated cows?
Well, let's see. The video of the camera that was torn up by something invisible. They had something that
So in the video, you can see the camera being torn apart?
you can't see anything. You can't. There's nothing. You can't see anything. You can see before it happens. It's normal, and afterward,
So I think
How much time is taking place between before and after?
I can't remember. But I mean, could that be hoaxed? Yeah, if Bigelow wanted to. But again, they weren't there to, in the beginning at least, for NIDS, they weren't there to try to prove that aliens are visiting. They're just trying to figure out why all this weird stuff is happening in one spot.
Right.
It mixes in a lot of Native American lore that got mixed in the picture, but it's been going on in that Uinta Basin for 200 years. Why? Don't know.
I mean, our government has studied the so like what is evidence? It's so frustrating to me too. When I was introduced to the skinwalker thing through George, man, I'm with you. Like, what's the evidence? What's going on? The weight of evidence is when we talk to people in the area and they all have these commonalities. Some people died of exotic cancers from burns from above where lights came down and hit them, and that's evidence. Their face is completely irradiated and they fucking died.
So there's the cow.
That's the camp. Yeah.
So you have a scientist like Dr. Colin Kelleher.
Hold on for a second. That's where they found it?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Just what in the fuck can... That is so crazy. Now, did they scan the area to look for another spot where it could have been slaughtered before it was moved to this area?
Well, that's what they concluded is it had to have been taken somewhere and slaughtered and then brought back. But
Jamie,
who does
can you
that?
make that a little larger, please? Can you just zoom in on that? Because that doesn't look very surgical to me. That looks like wolves.
Yeah, it was. There's no.
Just
They actually did an analysis, and it was done with two types of metallic tools.
But look at all the jagged edges.
They said they took samples and they sent them to 2 pathology labs. Didn't tell the guys what they're looking for. You tell us what you can see. And the pathologist said that 2 instruments had been used. One was a heavy machete type instrument that had been hacked, and then there is a scalpel that had surgically removed a lot of the flesh underneath.
It looks like something killed it and then they moved it to that spot. I mean, if I had to guess. The way it's eaten, though, I mean, it looks like it was eaten.
Well, there's no teeth marks. There are metallic marks. There's no teeth mark.
Meaning they
like
found...
a sliced.
Okay.
And
so something sharp sliced it.
So I think the bigger point is this was happening on this ranch with owners prior to owners prior to owners. I got to talk to a lot of people that knew. So here's the deal, the connection of this. So George does this thing, he reports on this for 20 years. The government is now studying this ranch, right, because of deployment or because of all this weird stuff. Why is the government spending money through OSAP to study this ranch and other things? And that's where it gets really fucking interesting. What happens after with our government programs? And that's what you know.
This is before we get to that. This image, like the jagged edges around the rib cage, that's supposedly sliced. That looks
Hacked.
like hacked. Okay.
I mean, look, it could. Let's say it's people doing this. 2 farmers to get them out of there. Let's say it's some program. I mean, although the cattle mutilation thing, you gave me a stack of documents this big, has been studied by the FBI. It's happened all over the country.
Yeah.
No one has ever been caught. Not a single person.
More than 10,000 cases.
With all the same types of cuts. I mean, this is not my expertise.
No, I've seen a lot of that. It's really weird.
There is
it's
another
really
theory.
weird, and the lack of blood is the weirdest part of it. Because what makes sense to me is that something killed that. They butchered it. They chopped all the meat off of it, and then they removed the carcass from that area and dropped it off
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like, if I had to guess.
That's
'Cause
what NIDS thinks.
There's no way that it was killed right there because you're seeing fresh, clean hay underneath it everywhere. There's no blood, which doesn't make any sense at all.
I think the question is this a government program? Is this something, or is this a scare tactic? It's been happening since the 50s. Like, what
It's a weird scare tactic.
It's a-
Click on that one below it, Jamie, the brown one with the green. Yeah, that one, please. Thank you. That's a weird one, too. Like, there's like a hole cut out. And there's a bunch of these they found all over the country, and weirdness, like organs removed. But the weirdest part about it is it's almost always there's no blood.
Yeah, I just investigated one, which I never thought I would do, but I got a call from a guy in Texas.
You got to see it physically?
Yeah, so right before lockdown, I go out and I'm like, this is so wild, I got to check this out. The guy calls me, it's a pretty freshy one at this point. Now, I'm no expert, but I went and got samples and took them to labs and this sort of thing to see if there were tools used. So here's my experience.
Did you get pictures of this?
Yeah, I filmed
You
the
have it
whole
on your
thing.
phone?
I'll show you after. I got it on my phone. Yeah. So I got great fucking photos. Weird
Well,
shit.
listen, man, just airdrop them to me now, and we'll send them to Jamie, and we'll put it up on the screen so other people can see it.
Okay, so let me...
Yeah, after the show is not going to help us.
Okay.
While you're
Come on,
looking, I'll
silly
tell him
goose.
about one of the theories about the cattle mutilations that Dr. Colin Kelleher developed was that somebody is tracking the spread of like mad cow prions through the food supply, and that they've been doing it under the guise of UFOs. Since no one would take UFOs and cattle mutilation seriously, they just do it in helicopters, and instead of just stealing these cattle, they're tracking how far these indestructible prions travel through the food supply, because it's in cattle, it's in pigs, it gets fed into chickens and things like that in feed, it's in deer. It's called chronic wasting disease in some circles. It's just weird.
Well,
It's just
chronic
weird.
wasting disease that's a different prion disease than mad cow.
Well,
right?
it's a variation. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, I
Yeah.
think, too. So the same kinds of things in different species. It is indestructible again. So you hit a deer that's got this, and you grind it up and you feed it to pigs. The pigs get it.
Yeah.
And then it could be passed on to other species, and it shows up in different ways. Kelleher was exploring the idea, whether or not it might be the cause of Alzheimer's or a version of mad cow in humans.
Do you
They're all going to you right now. This is a
I don't see
recent...
it.
Oh, it says downloading. So, I'm downloading them, and then
Oh,
they're...
right. Are you on the Wi-Fi?
No, but it's coming through. Here you
Okay.
go. It's about to go to you. It says waiting.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Boom.
I mean, I guess this does highlight, because this is my very limited amount of...
Can you send those to Jamie too? Jamie, can you
yeah,
put your
are you
airdrop on?
AirDrop, David?
Sorry. Should have had to do that, by the way. It's ready to roll. His
Uh,
airdrop is open.
I don't see you, bro.
Bro.
Hold on. There we go. Jamie.
So this is the stuff that you physically encountered.
Okay,
You physically saw this cow, and I'm
Yes.
looking at these images right now, and we're going to show them
sure.
in a second. And this is you said Texas.
Yeah, so...
Where in Texas?
Oh, gosh, what was the name of it? In the Panhandle. I'm blanking. So here's the deal. Oh, yeah, that's it. So I made the movie based on George's work of the same title, Hunt for the Skinwalker, right? And that movie was telling this story about how the United States government was studying this property of land because of UFOs and weird stuff. That and weird stuff included things like cattle.
Pull up this one. There's a lot of weird images, man. This the skin removed around the face,
Right. So this was
leaving the skull.
this is my first chance to see this for myself, because last time I was on your show, it was the ones in Oregon had just happened up at that ranch. And I thought, well, okay, if I'm ever going to do it, now's the time to do it. So I go, I get this call. Now, remind you, this is a rancher. This is their livelihood. It's this huge area of land.
Right there. Stop right there.
They're a very religious community. We go out to the middle of this land, and in the middle, there's this dead cow.
No blood.
No blood. And he had seen it prior, and the reason he called me is because in my movie, you could see this special kind of slice, like a jagged slice that is common to these types of things they think are real mutilations. And he is looking at it, he's like, that's exactly like in the movie. Now, this is a straight shooter. He's a religious guy. He had to ask his pastor if he could even go on camera with me. It freaks him out. So he sees this. Now, he sees dead animals all the time.
And he saw this cow, you said, before? How
Accidentally,
long?
he was out shooting BB guns with his kid, and he's on this big part of land, and he sees this down bull, and he goes over to it, and he's looking at it, and it's unlike anything he has ever seen in all of his years before. It had surgical cuts. There is no doubt somebody cut up this animal with those classic, like the ear gone, two types of tools, like a scissor type. But by the way, I tried to cut it. It is not easy to cut. So they had sharp tools, and then there's like a very thin slice kind of cut. So I got to take it, get samples, take them to labs, and try to see what type of tools did this. How did they do this with no blood on the ground? And all the soil around it was dead. So I was like, well, why is it all dead? Is that a natural thing? So I took soil samples and took them to a lab. And again, I'm outside of my... This is weird to me.
Okay.
But I think it's a real phenomenon. Somebody is killing these animals.
Someone.
However you want to say
Right.
it, someone is killing these animals in a highly specified technical way that has been repeated since the 50s on. Our FBI has studied it. He has shown me so many reports of these in association with discs, saucers.
Did this guy have any association with discs or saucers or anything?
No, he's just a guy that owns the
So
land.
he just found this cattle that's
Freak.
weirdly mutilated.
Somebody killed it.
Yeah.
And he's like, is this demonic? Is this some sort of Satanist thing? And I said, I don't think so, man. This goes back in history.
Like, I'm looking at the cuts specifically. They're very unimpressive.
Well,
That doesn't look like a laser did it or
No.
some
How long had it
incredibly
been out
sharp
there?
scalpel.
no, it was like a serrated. One was a serrated tool, and the
Right.
other.
That's the thing I'm saying. It's like something that we could do.
Oh, absolutely. We'd have to somehow do it though in Texas land, where the guy would shoot you in the face if you go and try to touch one of his cows. See, that's the other thing. No one's ever been caught. Never. Since
That's what's weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's
a mystery.
frustrating too. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been to the ranch, the Skinwalker Ranch in the basin, more than 24 times. I've never seen anything. I've interviewed the neighbors. I've interviewed the scientists. These are PhD level guys who had seen this stuff. A lot of times they have cameras that fail. I mean, it's, you've heard that story before, and it's very convenient that it happens just when some giant disc shows up, but it does happen. That their car batteries would die in the same spot. Whatever it was messed with them. And maybe it's humans, maybe it is human technology, but no humans were ever found to be doing this stuff. NIDS was there for all those years. They didn't want to tell anybody about it. They shared the information with me, but you can't publish it. There's no real physical proof, so they just left it there. And I had tried to do a documentary. Ended up, I talked to them into letting me write a book about it. But if you're looking for physical evidence and solid proof, and they don't have it.
What's the primary are there any primary theories of why they do this to cows? Why someone's doing this to cows?
You need to catch somebody and
Yeah.
ask them. I mean, that's
That's really
Look, man,
really weird that no one's been caught.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
You've done an amazing job in this book of trying to boil it down for dummies like me, but it's hard. It is a complicated and insanely nuanced subject.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it like this many worlds theory, for one example, the just the possibility that there's like, explain that.
Sure.
Explain for people that don't understand what quantum mechanics even means. Give them just like a little bit of that, and then explain many worlds theory.
Yeah, good. This is what I'm here to do. So,
Thank you.
You know, an electron, take an electron. Quantum mechanics should apply to the entire universe, but it becomes unmistakable when you look at little tiny things, right? So we always are talking about electrons or atoms and so forth. An electron has a position, and, well, sorry, let me not even say that. Even that was wrong. It's just so hard to correctly talk about quantum mechanics, right? If you were Isaac Newton, before there was quantum mechanics, there was classical mechanics. And basically, quantum mechanics and classical mechanics are the only two big frameworks that have ever existed in physics. You know, classical mechanics was so good that everyone thought that was just right, and it was all a matter of filling the details until quantum mechanics came along and changed things. In classical mechanics, an electron is a point. It has a position, a location in space, and it has a velocity. It's moving somewhere. And from that, you can predict what's going to happen, okay? Quantum mechanics says, no. The electron has a wave function. So there's a wave. You know, sometimes you hear this debate about are things like electrons and photons particles or waves. The answer is that they are waves. And the wave function has this weird property that when you're not looking at it, it's a wave, it's all spread out or it's localized somewhere, but it obeys an equation, the Schrödinger equation. So far, so good, just like regular physics. There's a thing, the wave function, it obeys an equation, the Schrödinger equation. You can predict what's going to happen next. But the weird thing about quantum mechanics is that there's a whole separate set of rules for what happens when you look at the thing, when you observe it, when you measure it.
That's where things get squirrely
Yes.
with people describing it, right?
Yes.
And that's where they want to go woo-woo on you.
It's an opening to be woo-woo, right? When
Yes.
you say, like, what do you mean
Right.
observe something? Like, does it have to be a conscious being? Can it be a video camera? You know, that's just weird, right?
Is it the act of measuring that changes things?
Well, this is the puzzle, okay? This is what is called the measurement problem of quantum mechanics. That the rules we teach our students at Caltech or anywhere else, when we teach them quantum mechanics in their sophomore year of college, the rules say when a system is observed, when it is measured, its state, its wave function, changes dramatically, suddenly, and unpredictably.
Now, let me ask you this. How do we know this based on if you're measuring it and it changes? How do we know? Because we didn't measure it before. Like, what observations are we making that we understand the state of it before it's measured without measuring it?
Good. There's a couple of ways. So let me make things even simpler. Forget about where the electron is located and think about the electron is spinning, right? Okay. The electron is spinning just like the Earth spins. It's really exactly like that. It's like a little spinning top. Except when you measure the spin, you can sort of send the electron through a magnetic field and it will get deflected either up or down, depending on whether it's spin up or spin down. You only ever get one of two answers. It's either going up or going down. It's nowhere in between. This is an empirical measured fact, okay? So that's a part of quantum mechanics. That's the quantum fact, that there's discrete set of possible answers to this question. Is it spinning clockwise or counterclockwise? Yes or no. It's just those two possibilities, nowhere in between. So if you have a magnetic field that is oriented vertically, send your electron through it, it gets deflected up, you say, oh, it's spin up. So now I've measured its spin. Now I know what its state is. If I send it through another magnetic field, or oriented vertically, it will always be deflected up every single time. We know what it is. We're going to measure it. Measuring it, in this case, doesn't change it. It's in exactly that state. We know it, okay? Now let's send it through a magnetic field that is oriented horizontally. So it's going to be deflected either right or left. We know exactly what state it's in. It's spinning this way. But when you send it through that magnetic field that's oriented horizontally, it gets deflected left or right 50-50, unpredictably. There's no way we can predict it. And then once it is, so okay, now it's been spinning up, you measured its spin left, let's say, send it through another magnet that is going vertically. And now it's 50-50 again. It could be spin up or spin down. So somehow, even though we knew exactly what state it was in, we couldn't predict what would happen next. That is part of quantum mechanics.
So the act of sending it through these things where it makes it vertical or horizontal, what is happening to it when it's going through these things?
So in quantum mechanics, what we say is that it's not that we don't know whether the electron is spinning clockwise or counterclockwise. It can be in a superposition of both. That's just the spin version of the position of the electron can be spread out in a wave, right? It's truly not just that we are lacking some knowledge. It's that the knowledge really isn't there. And again, this is how we teach quantum mechanics in textbooks. And then I'm going to correct it because Many Worlds is much better. But This is the standard textbook version. There's a wave function. The wave function for a spin is it's either up or down or some combination. And then there's a rule that says when you measure the spin, you only get up or down. You don't see the wave function. Just like the cloud that you have for the electron's position, when you look at it, you see it at a location. So another way to make the same argument is take a little piece of, I have a nice little image of this when I give talks, a little piece of uranium. So it's a radioactive little chunk of metal, and you put it in a bubble chamber. So it is emitting radioactive particles, and you detect the particles. You can see a little streak of motion when the particle leaves the uranium, okay? Well, like I said, when you're not looking at it, this electron is supposed to obey an equation, the Schrödinger equation. And you can ask what the prediction is when a radioactive nucleus decays and gives off an electron. What is its wave function going to do? What is the wave function of the electron going to be? And the answer is it goes off in a spherical wave. It goes off in all directions at once.
Evenly.
Yeah. All directions evenly. But you never see that.
Is that roughly based on the
line.
shape of the piece of uranium? Does it vary?
No, because the electron gets from one individual nucleus of an atom, right? So what the uranium is doing doesn't matter. It's just that one atom matters. And the easiest thing for the electron to do is just to go out in a sphere. It doesn't have to. It can go out in higher energy states. But the point is, it's not going out in a straight line. But when you look at it, you see a straight line, right? That's the fundamental mystery of quantum mechanics, that how we describe the thing when we're not looking at it is different than what we see when we look at it.
So when you're in pursuit of an understanding, a deeper understanding of quantum mechanics, when you're thinking about people from the 1900s that are just sort of basically getting the first steps going to understand this stuff, when you're talking about this lack of funding and the lack of encouragement for people to pursue quantum mechanics, you strongly feel like there are answers to these questions.
Yeah, that's right.
That we just need better tools and a better understanding, better equations, more time.
Yeah, me and Einstein think this, right? So Einstein is one of the secret heroes of the book because he has this reputation as someone who just couldn't quite accept quantum mechanics. The title, Something Deeply Hidden, is a quote from Einstein when he was talking about when he was a kid and he had a compass, right? And he was given his first magnetic compass and he could rotate it this way and that way and it always pointed north. And you and I would go, that's cool. But he was Einstein. He's like, wow, this is amazing. Why? How does it know where north is, right? And he said there must be something deeply hidden that explains why it's doing this mysterious thing. And he felt the same way about quantum mechanics, that we gave these set of rules, which are called the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. One set of rules for when you're looking at it, one set of rules for when you're not. And Einstein was like, oh, come on. Clearly, this is not the final answer to the nature of reality, right? He wanted to know God's thoughts. He's like, I want to know everything. We're not done yet. There must be more going on. And so Many Worlds is one of the proposed answers to what could be going on. It's not the only one. There's alternatives, but it's definitely my favorite. It's definitely the easiest one to write down. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so hit us with this many worlds theory.
Okay, so think about this electron. You say that it could be either spin up or spin down. It's a combination of both. That's its wave function. You measure it, you only ever see spin up or spin down. So Copenhagen says that's because the wave function suddenly changed, snapped into place when you observed it. Don't ask me what it means to observe something. That's not what Copenhagen lets you ask.
Okay.
Many Worlds says what you're missing is two things. Number one, you're a quantum system. You're obeying the rules of quantum mechanics. You're made of atoms and electrons and so forth. You have a wave function too, okay? So you're secretly treating yourself as a classical thing when you make that measurement, but you really should be treating yourself quantum mechanically, right? That's one thing. And the other thing is something that Einstein invented, namely called entanglement. When quantum mechanics says there's a wave function for a system, it doesn't say there's a separate wave function for every particle, right? It says that there's only one wave function for the whole universe. So the way I like to say it is, imagine two particles come in and bounce off of each other. Either one has a wave function and it's, unpredictable exactly what angle it's going to go off at. So both of the particles that go off, you don't know where they're going. But because momentum is conserved, if they came in at equal velocities, they'll go out at equal velocities and in opposite directions. If you measure one, then you know where the other one is going, right? That's entanglement. The observed state of one system can be related to the observed state of another system. So those are the two ingredients. You're a quantum system, and quantum systems can be entangled with each other. So Hugh Everett, who was a graduate student when he invented this idea in the 1950s, said, look, when you measure that electron, what happens physically? Like, forget about you're a person, you're conscious, all of that BS. Like, you're a physical system, you obey the Schrödinger equation. You are a quantum mechanical system, you obey the laws of physics. So you look at the electron, your wave function changes. It used to be you're just a person doing whatever you do, but then after you look at the electron, you become entangled with it. And it splits. So there is one part of the wave function that says the electron was spinning clockwise and you measured it spinning clockwise. And there's another part of the wave function that says the electron was spinning counterclockwise and you saw it spinning counterclockwise. Now, everybody knows this. Like that far, it's not controversial at all. That's clearly the prediction of the equations of quantum mechanics. But everyone else said, well, that means that I'm some weird combination of I saw it spinning one way and I saw it spinning the other way, but I've never felt that way. When I look at real electrons, I see them one way or the other. That can't be right. That can't be the final answer. The wave function must somehow collapse. And Everett said, no, what you're missing is there's now two separate worlds. Both of those part of the wave function are real, but they're different worlds. They will never interact with each other again. What happens in one part of the wave function will not affect what happens in the other part. So now there's a version of you that saw the electron spinning clockwise, and there's another version of you that saw it spinning counterclockwise. And that's just taking seriously the prediction of quantum mechanics. It's not adding any extra stuff, any extra worlds, anything like that.
That is the part where my brain broke.
All right.
The idea that there's a you that observes it going clockwise and a you that observes it going in a different direction, like that is so hard to understand. Do you apply this in your regular life? Like, do you think, like when you go home and you say hi to your wife and you open up the refrigerator, do you think of yourself as this quantum being that's existing in this super state?
So, I mean, there's a couple of answers to that. One is, sure, if I think about it, like I really do believe it. I have a chapter in the book, which my editor resisted at first, but then he let me get away with it, which is a dialogue between a young philosopher and her father, who is a physicist. And the father is skeptical about all this philosophical nonsense, and she tries to explain how many worlds works to him. And at the end, his last question is, do you really believe this? Are you really taking this seriously? And look, that's a perfectly good question. It's a very respectable question because it is many worlds. It's not crazy or weird or bizarre, but it's certainly very, very far away from our everyday experience, right? So what it's asking you to do is to say, I have these equations. They are really, really good at fitting what I do observe in the world and making predictions. I can build a Large Hadron Collider, et cetera. I will take them seriously even for things that I can't directly observe, because they're the best equations I have, right? Until a better set of equations come along, I will believe these equations. And the implication of that is, there's a whole bunch of worlds, like a huge number, like a real, humongously, unimaginably big number, maybe an infinite number, maybe finite, we don't know, of different copies of you, and they're being created all the time. The good news is that it doesn't really affect how you go through your life. It doesn't really imply that you should behave any differently than you would if you just lived in one world.
But do you think of each choice that you make possibly changing everything about the world that you exist in? How are you looking at it? You know what I'm saying? Because you are a guy who probably understands it as good as anybody that's alive. So as weird as this stuff sounds, to me it sounds like it's almost impossible for me to comprehend. So I'm trying to filter it through Your understanding of it.
Well, I think that
He's taking his jacket off. We're getting serious.
I know
here.
it's getting hot in here. Like, physics is heating us up. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to say it the best. It doesn't change who you are. It's certainly not true that you making a decision is what branches the wave function of the universe. I guess that's the right thing to say.
Good, because I want to stop all woo.
Yeah, you can't do
before
that.
it happens.
Everyone, believe
Hit the
me,
brakes.
the joke about how certain political choices imply that we're living in the wrong branch of the wave function has been made many, many times, right? But
okay.
it's not that your choices create different universes. Different universes get created, and maybe you're different in them by a little bit. In fact, I like to point out there is an app you can download if you have an iPhone called Universe Splitter, which will branch the wave function of the universe for you. And then if you agree ahead of time to do one thing in one branch and another thing in another branch, then there will be multiple copies of you who are living different lives. And then you can deal with that and your therapist however you like. But
what is the application exactly doing?
What it's doing is basically a version of measuring the spin of
It's called
an
Universe
electron.
Splitter?
Universe Splitter. It's only for iPhones.
I'm going to grab this right now.
But,
Sorry,
yeah.
Android people.
Yeah, sorry. It's not even a web page. It's only an app. There's equivalent web pages. But.
Okay, I'm pulling it up right now.
Yeah, and what you can do, basically it sends a signal to a lab that coincidentally is located in Geneva, Switzerland, but has nothing to do with the Higgs boson or anything like that. They send a single photon down a pipe to what's called a beam splitter. So the wave function of the photon goes 50-50. It gets sent left. It gets sent right. And if you agree, and so then it sends back whether you ended up in the branch of the wave function where it went left or where it went. There you go. 199. Come on.
Yeah.
The
it's
power
$2.
of changing the universe is in your hands.
I downloaded it.
Good.
I got it. I paid for it. I got it right here.
Yeah.
All right.
So if you have any tough choices, you can type in, I want to have pizza or I want to have Chinese food for dinner tonight.
Well, it
right?
says in one universe I will take a chance. In the other one I will play it safe.
Yeah, but you can correct those. You can fill in whatever you want.
Really?
Yeah, that's the good part.
But what is happening with this
I will
app?
ask her to marry me. I will not ask her to marry me.
Is
right?
this
I
the
will accept this job. I will go somewhere else.
Equivalent of a quantum fortune cookie?
Yeah. But
Yes.
except that all possible fortunes are obtained in different universes. The bad news is you can't ever find out how things went in the other universe. You
Oh,
can't talk
Christ.
to the different universes.
That's the problem, right?
Yeah, that's
so
the problem.
people will be
right.
paralyzed by analysis.
That's why you should act the same as if you just lived in one universe, because you can never talk to the people in the other ones.
So, but now let's hit the brakes on the woo again.
Yeah.
Because people would like to believe that there are. I mean, are there an infinite number of yous existing at the exact same time, making various choices which send you off in different directions?
So, number one, we don't know if it's infinite number or just really big, but there's certainly a really, really big number. It's big enough to be, big enough for whatever you want. But it's not everything. The theory does not say everything happens somewhere, right? The theory says the Schrödinger equation is obeyed. There's an equation that is obeyed. So electrons will never convert into protons because electrons are negatively charged and protons are positively charged. And nowhere in the Schrödinger equation can you violate the conservation of charge, right? So there's plenty of things that don't happen, but then there are plenty of things that do happen. And some things are more likely than others for you to experience. So again, it's sort of it's a mind-bendy thing, but it's a straightforward prediction of the equations, and it doesn't affect our lives. There's no rule that says, to be a moral person, to be a good utilitarian and make the world happy, knowing that the wave function is branching into multiple copies, I should act differently somehow. It's exactly the same as it would be in the ordinary world.
So, and you are the ordinary world, no matter how many copies of you there are, or how many versions of you there are.
There's nothing. So when all these copies are being made, there's no essence of you that is traveling through one of the copies, right? Like
Right.
all of these people are separate people. So I use the analogy, it's like identical twins. They were the same zygote or whatever, and now they're different people, okay? So that's the same thing. Like you're you now, and if you hit the button and branch the wave function, there'll be two different people, both of whom used to be you, but they're not the same person anymore because different things happen to them.
Now, when people think about the concept of quantum mechanics and the way you're talking about it, describing things in the micro and the macro, you think of your existence itself very similar in a very similar manner, the way you think of electrons, the way you think of things being quantum, is that you are a combination of all these quantum things.
Yeah.
So you don't operate in some sort of static state that's very like here and now and carbon, and you can put it on a scale and it'll never change. There's constant versions of you.
Yeah, it's kind of like a whooshing where more and more versions of you are being created all the time, and it's an interesting thing because even the best trained physicists sort of think intuitively classically. Like, look, here's a table, there's a bottle, right?
You have
and,
to.
You have
Red
to.
light comes, hit the brakes.
And this is how we evolved, right?
Yes.
This is how our brains work, right? And like I said, many worlds is one respectable version of quantum mechanics. There are other respectable versions, more respectable than the textbook presentation. But they all the other ones somehow lean on our classical experience. And the textbook version certainly does. It says, like, you're a classical person observing a quantum mechanical system and so forth. And Everett, when he was a graduate student, he had arguments across the ocean with people in Copenhagen, who tried to push their way forward. And he's like, why do you get to be classical and the electron has to be quantum? Like, why aren't you quantum? Like, why isn't everything, what's so special about you, really?
Right.
And he was trying to think of the quantum mechanics of the whole universe, right? Where there's not a separate observer outside because he's doing the whole universe all at once. And so everything had to be quantum. And I think that that's another thing that is pushing us